On this week's Extra Lean program, Timon must have read an entirely different version of Tolkien's work than everyone else. Nobleshield makes a case for both alignment and better economics education in the U.S. with one post. Dundermoose exposes the Bro SR whilst trying to sing their praises. And BDubs comment is a big number 2 on Daddy Rolled a One's post about Rule 0. Welcome one and all to Driving and Dragons. I'm Daniel, and I'm here to tell you who showed up to this week's game having intelligence as a dump stat. This week was uncharacteristically slow in the idiotic TTRPG takes department, and I think we can all blame the 25th anniversary of Lord of the Rings, well, the Lord of the Rings movies, that is, for that. Feeds were flooded with all your favorite person who actually read the books versus idiot who only saw the movies arguments, and if this series were about Tolkien, well, and only Tolkien, the entire show could have been bad LOTR arguments this week. One revelation did spawn from the deluge, however. I've determined that the Eagles could have flown the ring to Mordor as a plot hole argument is basically the flat Earth version of Lord of the Rings discourse. That's right, middle flat earthers and their inability to comprehend that flying on eagles isn't brought up in the Council of Elrond because it's so incredibly stupid that everyone there, even the hobbits who lack any kind of tactical education or experience, realize that it isn't even worth bringing up for a host of different reasons. So here is the shorthand. Once someone brings up flying eagles to Mount Doom, you can write off any other opinion they happen to have about Tolkien's works, mainly because you're pretty safe to assume that it's stupid. While you fine folks are here, hit the like, hype, and subscribe buttons to let YouTube know that this is a place for quality content. Share the video with your friends and jump in the comments for some lively discussion. Or if you're like Jessica Holden, just jump in the comments to show your ass, as it does all the thinking for you, and pump up my engagement numbers while informing everyone here that you didn't watch any of my videos before deciding you knew what was in them. Trust me, sometimes I wish that my visuals were AI generated, because I seriously doubt that part where I bash my knuckles against a brake caliper when the wrench slips would have hurt nearly as much if it had been done by Grok. Speaking of car work, I have my wife's Civic back from the transmission shop, and it's got a cracked exhaust manifold, so expect some background video of me swearing at rusted, stubborn, rounded off manifold bolts here in the near future. Once the Dart makes it here, we can get started on the car that will be given away on the channel. I will be adding input on design for that project to both memberships and Patreon, and possibly as a tier for Super Chats, since that money is what pays for the venture. We are almost to the point where the channel has earned enough to pay for the outrageous cost of shipping a nominally non-functional car from New York to Alabama, so I'm pretty excited about that. Corvid Codex is set to go back live on Kickstarter for a second attempt to launch that project the way I want to, instead of having to go the digital only or print on demand route. So be sure to look out for that. I'd love to have Corvid Codex come out in the kind of high quality, you can keep it on your shelf book that we all deserve, as opposed to having to do digital only and the cheaper print on demand options, just because that's what I'm going to have to do if I can't get this Kickstarter to work. Remember, some of your friends in the TTRPG space are the authors and artists who put their time and effort into creating this book for us to have the kind of reading material that inspired our games to start with. So that said, let's get to the stupidity. We start in the land of Middle-earth, long ago, with Timon Klein. He grabbed a Palantir and clearly lacked the mental fortitude to control the powerful Seeing Stone of Fëanor, because he saw this strange version of Tolkien's master work where the good guys never use power, never take up arms, never use weapons of the enemy, never assume the mantle of authority. No one ever rules, ever. I seriously hope that this is tongue-in-cheek and meant as a mockery of some of the utterly vapid takes that we've seen out of the Rings of Power is a Good Show crowd. I seem to remember this entire subplot about some guy returning to be a king or something and leading some armies against the Dark Lord, and this book where the good guys never use power, take up arms, or assume authority. And Gandalf certainly never wields the flame of a nor claims to serve the sacred fire. He never does that. He never smites a foe upon the mountainside. Return of the King is about how the king returns all of his power to the general populace and steps down, and definitely not how he goes on to rule for 122 years. This has got to be sarcastic. There's no way a person can actually be this incredibly stupid. And don't even get me started on the Silmarillion, guys. Probably 80% of that book equates to pissed off elves shaking their swords at Melkor and threatening to beat his ass. It's roughly 600 years of taking up arms, assuming mantles of authority, and using power. Hell, there are even a few ill-fated attempts to use the enemy's weapons against him. Okay, so I have to get off the painfully moronic comments about Middle-earth, or all the BC headache powder in the world will fail to end my suffering. Let's talk about role-playing games, shall we? After all, that is what the channel is about. Nobleshield charged headlong into overreach this week while talking about gold for XP. What's his issue? Why it heavily inflates the amount of gold in a campaign, and it leads to the rejecting of jobs because they aren't worth enough pay. Hell, a small village may have a great need but only a very limited resources, and the PCs will just say, sorry guys, you are going to keep getting raided by those goblins if you can't get me at least the down payment on my new Lexus. There are so many problems with this lengthy comment, ranging from displaying a lack of basic economic principles to failing to understand the mechanics of gold for XP, all the way out to neglecting to considering how it works with other mechanics in game. It certainly won't inflate the amount of gold in the campaign, as the costs to level up are a literal gold sink that functionally removes gold from the practical economy of the game world. If anything, it inflates the value of gold, as every transaction now functionally has a secondary opportunity cost built in. That being, the sword doesn't just cost me 100 gold now. It costs my 100 gold and 100 gold worth of training costs to advance that otherwise doesn't exist. Now let's look at this they may choose not to help problem. Let's see here. If only there were some kind of behavioral mechanic, like a system that aligns the player characters with certain moral codes. Like you could have a helpful code that puts assisting others and driving out oppressive and violent forces as a priority over personal gain. Or you could also have a more selfish code that favors harming others and getting ahead and thinking about what's best for number one. Like good characters and evil characters. Maybe these good characters help the village even if the reward is, shall we say, lower than market value. And even if there's no extra money that they happen to come across on their adventures, eventually all those quick, easy 100 gold piece jobs add up, and maybe they advance a little bit faster than the evil guys as a result. I got it. I've got it. We shall call it alignment. Now that would, we can't do that. We can't do alignment. That would clearly just be meaningless and restrictive for no reason. Whatever you want to do there. Sandy Peterson said so. He said that alignment wouldn't work. Last but not least, and I will just come out and say it, Noble seems to be neglecting the fact that gold for XP is more accurately described as gold value for XP. I don't need gold pieces. This Van Gogh will do just fine, as will this collection of Rolex watches that the baddies had. Nobleshield has plenty of good takes in his battles with the Bro SR. This just ain't one of them. Speaking of the Bro SR, friend of the show Dundermoose found his way back into our hallowed halls. You see, the best thing about the Bro SR is that they are some of the most self-snitching folks on the interwebs. They post stuff all the time that directly contradicts the #objectively correct opinions and preferences that they love to present as facts that they spew out regularly. like what we got from the man of the mighty mustache this week. He came on my New Year's Eve live stream himself not 6 weeks ago with the Bro SR Maxim of first edition AD&D, rules as written, Bronstein 1-to-1 time is the only game worth playing. Only to come out now with, have you ever noticed that the guys who can walk away from D&D are the best at it? That's right, the guys who identify with 1E AD&D explicitly as written in the black and white text are supposedly also the ones who can walk away from it so easily. I seem to remember, way back in the forgotten mists of 2025, several bros with names that include things like Dubs or referring to like the buttocks got posted. They were inscribed on these stone tablets titled something that loosely translates as people putting their lowest number in intellect. In these mythical tablets, they spoke of how games like Call of Cthulhu were not real games because only first edition AD&D was an actual game. Way to pull the curtain back there, Toto. You exposed the Broser of Oz. Maybe, just maybe, the Bro SR is just a prototype that its maker rushed to market far too early because the bugs are plentiful and they're conspicuous. Either way, hashtag thank you Dundermoose for exposing the bros once again. Rounding out the Bro SR nonsense for the week, we have BDubs as he continues to close in on Rump's lead for the race to the bottom. You know, I tried to go find some modern D&D stupidity this week, but they are all either too busy crying about criminals getting arrested for crimes, or they are just repeating the same bad 5e D&D advice that they have been spewing for years. You know, we get it, safety card, no death wish fulfillment. You know, they don't really play, we know. I even went into Rump DM's feed to give him a fighting chance against the King of Clowns. But alas, Rump has just been recruiting players, and best of luck to him. I like to see a focus on actual play. All the really stupid stuff that Rump posted this week ended up just being quote posts from his main rival. So we are left with BDubs, challenging long-form OSR content creator Daddy Rolled a 1 on Rule 0. DR1, and I will not be calling him Daddy, came out and stated that changing rules was explicitly part of the referee's job in early D&D. DR1 had a lengthy video on it and posted a screen cap of the rulebook talking about alterations. As I've said so many times before to the Rawtards, Rule 0 is a rule as written. It is explicitly stated in every major RPG rulebook on the market, including every single edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Of course, BDubs can't handle this, because the Bro SR is the living embodiment of TTRPG doublethink. Gygax is utterly infallible and the greatest genius of all time who can do no wrong, but he did play wrong and he didn't know what he was doing. It seems largely to depend on if the statement that they're looking at from Gygax happens to support Bro SR nonsense or not. Like here, apparently Gary Gygax put Rule 0 in the rulebook to give good game designers like him permission to change things, and it wasn't meant for bad game designers like everyone else. This is essentially the same retarded argument that anti-Second Amendment activists use when they say that militia means police force, so the Second Amendment is the government giving itself permission to have guns. This is the Bro SR conceit. This is why they are not to be taken seriously. And this is how we know that they used intelligence as a dump stat. The Bro SR, and BDubs in particular, is a study in so close, yet so far from getting it right. That's all I've got, everybody. Good night.